Mexico is not going to like it. This is what Donald Trump said as he signed the executive order labeling Mexican criminal groups, you know what word, as terrorists. But what does that really mean? Mike Vigil, a retired former high-ranking DEA agent, said it's nothing new. It's all been done. It would mean that the U.S. could send maybe drone strikes over. It could do incursions on the other side of the border, but that stuff probably goes on a little bit already. And of course, we'd have to be very, very careful with that because Mexico is our number one trade partner. If you think Mexico is just some small, poor country to the south of us, well, it's not. It's a very large, medium income country that's important to as a place for us to sell our goods, for part of the manufacturing process. For example, U.S. auto companies and Japanese auto companies have a lot of parts, like the engine blocks and stuff get made down there and then they're sent over and final assembly happens in the U.S. So what the impact of Trump making this declaration is, like many of his declarations, is probably more symbolic. He sees aggressive verbiage as good bargaining tools. The Mexican government did something very aggressive several years ago when they banned all DEA agents from coming into their country. Now, of course, they walked that back, but it was an aggressive tactic to push back on U.S. law enforcement getting too much into the mix of internal domestic Mexican politics because they have people they want to protect, such as their president perhaps. But we're going to get back to corruption in Mexico. But let's look at what's going on the ground there first that would make Trump want to be so aggressive. Of course, there's been these massive waves of deaths the last, 5, 6, 7 years from fentanyl. We're going on since 2017. We might be going on 600,000 OD deaths in the United States. Majority of it from some type of synthetic opioid. But if you've noticed your blue pills getting weaker lately, it's because they have. Now, in 2023, Los Chapitos, the sons of you-know-who, issued an order that there was to be no more F manufactured in the area of Sinaloa. And apparently that was put into effect. Many small small manufacturers did stop. Some that didn't were found el muerte. Now, of course, that didn't stop the flow in, but there has been less seizures at the border, and of the already pressed joints that are coming in, it's not so much that they're weaker, it's that there's less variance. So there was a wide variance in the purity of the F being made, and that was part of the reason there were so many ODs. You would go and get 2 pills from somebody and you were fine, and then the next time you got 2 pills, it was too much, you died, because it was being sourced from different chemists. So as the U.S. really pushed down hard on the F, I think as a very brilliant long-term strategy, Ovidio and Joaquin Guzman, who are now in custody in the U.S., decided to make at least a show of slowing the production down or making it more stable, which also probably gave them a chance to consolidate their hold. Interviews with manufacturers on that side of the border say prior to 2 years ago, you could buy all the precursors on the corner and you just set up your own lab. It wasn't really so much the organized crime making the stuff. They provide protection, you pay them a tax, then if you're a chemist, you take it to the border, and then they buy it at the border and they move it over to the U.S. and do what they do. But now you have to get permission to manufacture. They have to trust that you're not going to make yourself a target of investigation. They have to probably trust you're going to make a stable product or invariant product. It's always the same, because really Americans could use all the F they wanted and it would be out of the newspaper headlines if there weren't so many ODs, which really comes from not so much you have to make it weaker, it just needs to be the same all the time. So that is somewhat going on. I think in 2024, all OD deaths were down like 17%, and probably from F it was more like 25%. So that's good. Now, Ovidio and Joaquin are the two guys that are in custody right now in the United States. Ovidio, of course, was captured about 18 months ago, one of Los Chapitos, and Joaquin is the one who showed up a few months back with El Mayo Zambada in an airplane as if he was, well, I doubt if it's as if he was. He certainly was turning in El Mayo. And like I said, as part of that long-term strategy I think these guys had, they said, there's so much heat coming from the Fetty, we need to turn down the volume of it so there's less OD deaths. We at least get it off of the front page of every U.S. newspaper, and then we're going to show up. So they grabbed a video, and once they got a video, these are four brothers, they're close, they said, well, we got to do something to ameliorate our brother's situation, because without that, he certainly would end up like the dad with life, no parole, maybe going to Florence ADX or some very awful maximum security U.S. penitentiary. But with the video in custody, the fentanyl turning down somewhat, and Joaquin showing up with El Mayo, they now are free, and this is just what happened in court the other day. The prosecutors revealed that they're working on a global plea agreement. A global plea agreement happens often in conspiracy cases where everybody agrees to plead guilty, make the government's job easy, and everybody gets a predetermined sentence. It's good for all parties, well, in the sense of it reduces hassle and cost. What would Ovidio and Joaquin be wanting to get in terms of time? Well, they have a marker. El Mayo's own son, Vicente, back in the trial against Mr. Guzman, Chop O, he got an 11-year sentence and had to turn in $1 billion. And in exchange, he testified against everybody, including his dad's old business partner. And he's now, Vicente is free in the United States. There's photos of him at airports. He's in witness protection, but I mean, he's traveling around. So in the age of the internet, you know, people's faces are known. Someone snagged a photo of him. So he's around in the U.S., but I mean, that was known. Just like the Flores twins, who just did the podcast. So Ovidio and Joaquin are trying to negotiate a global plea agreement. The top layer of the narcos down there have been, I think they've accumulated so much money. If they're smart, they're looking at the Colombian model. The Colombians, remember, after the death of Juan Pablo, they worked that amnesty deal where if you turned yourself in, you would do 5 years. And whatever money wasn't seized, you got to keep, and there were no more charges. So many of them, like the Ochoa family, the biggest family in the country, 2 of the brothers did 5 years, got out, and lived as normal, ultra-wealthy businessmen and didn't get back into business. One was stupid enough to get back into business, Fabio, and he caught another 30-year sentence, which he just finished, and he just got out and was deported back down there. But Chapo's wife, El Mencho's wife and daughter, a bunch of them have gone into the prison system, served a few years, probably gave up some people, some info, some money, and got out. And the question just is going to be, who are the sacrificial lambs? Chop is one. El Mayo is going to be another. I would imagine those 2 sons, Joaquin and Ovidio, want to get under 12 years. And they don't want their brothers that are still free to be taken into custody. And they're going to turn in a lot of money, and they're going to say, hey, we turned down the temperature on the Fetty Wap situation. Though Fetty Wap's so easy to make, we could see production move onto the U.S. side of the border. It may already be happening, and that would be scary. You know, if you wanted to make some money here in America, you could get the precursors in small amounts on the dark web and make your own batches. So hopefully we won't see that. Now, while Ovidio and Joaquin are trying to work a deal, there's 11,000 soldiers on the streets of Culiacan that has not been able to stop over 1,000 homicides and disappearances in the city over the last 120 days or so since the time of El Mayo being taken into custody while being tricked onto that plane. What a wild story that was, and you can watch my story on that. But it's so those two factions, the holdouts of El Mayo and Chapitos, are battling hard. It seems like Chapitos are winning, but there's so much violence. But El Mayo has hardcore people, and there's so much violence. It's gotten so bad now. They have roadblocks. The narcos have set up, the sicarios have roadblocks around the city. You try to drive out, and if you look a certain way, they'll snatch you out of the car and take everyone's cell phone. And they'll look in all your contacts, and they'll look at all your text messages. And if they feel you're connected to a rival faction, you will be taken out there or snatched and taken for enhanced interrogation. So, like I said, there's been 1,000 deaths and disappearances just in the last 120 days. And Culiacan is a city not much bigger than, say, like a Detroit or something. It's maybe 900,000 people. Well, it's bigger than Detroit, but not much. It's about this. What's 900,000? Columbus, Ohio, or Indianapolis or something. It's 900,000 people. Those cities don't see 1,000 murders in 3 years. Or 5 years, probably more like. And they've seen that many in the last 120 days. So the war rages while on this side of the border they're trying to cut a deal. Trump wants to send in military, send it in to help the people of Culiacan. But going back to Trump's thing, I don't know what. It sounds good to say, oh, we're going to use the military, but use them where, on what exactly? If you would simply cause the large groupings of those groups to disperse, right? You wouldn't see hundreds of them gathering up, and that would be good. But ultimately, a DR rug conspiracy consists of people making deals on phones, and a couple trucks go this way, and one boat, and this, and it's not a military problem to a degree. Now, the military could be somewhat helpful, but Mexico would have to want to participate in that, and of course, nobody wants to give up their sovereignty. Now, on our side of the border, the consumers, and of course Europe has become the number one consumer of the yayos, but we're still a huge consumer. Record amounts of production in Colombia, and on our side of the border, not only our demand, but our weak law enforcement or failings in law enforcement. Many DEA agents expressed that we're fighting a losing war. Remember, the war on drugs has been going on decades and decades, and drugs just seem to be a greater and greater part of global culture. You have a lot of regions. I mean, there's a lot of cocaine and heroin is popularly used. Meth in Africa now, in part, big cities in Africa, the Middle East, tons of stuff gets sent there. Syria, it's been revealed with the fall of Assad, was a narco state. They were pumping out massive amounts of meth pills to support the government, billions a year. It was one of the biggest drug operations in the world. That's the most popular drug in the whole Middle East. The world is a very large place. We don't think about it, but or you don't hear about it, I should say. But every night in Basra, which is the second largest city in Iraq, SWAT teams fan out and raid crystal meth spots. So the drugs just seems to be getting bigger and bigger. And the DEA on our side of the border, or the DEA, the United States Drug Enforcement Administration, has less than 5,000 agents spread over nearly 300 offices. So you're talking 20, 30 agents average an office. A smaller office probably has a handful. So if you're able to corrupt a few people, you can compromise a whole region of the country. down in Miami in 2022, a guy named Nicholas Palmieri, who was a group leader. He was forced to resign after getting too cozy with defense attorneys in Miami, going on vacation with them, defense attorneys of big narcos, and out of that same Miami office. So he was the group supervisor. I'm sorry, he wasn't out of Miami. That was the head of the whole Central and North American and Central American offices was Nicholas Palmieri. He just had to resign for being too cozy with Miami lawyers. And then in the Miami office, there was a group supervisor who was, well, they got him on wiretap accepting $70,000 from a recently retired DEA agent who had set himself up as a private investigator. So he was being hired by defense attorneys who had dope man clients to get information from active DEA agents about ongoing investigations, right? So if you're selling, you want to know, are you a target? Are any of the people working for you been taken into custody? You want intelligence. You're not necessarily paying someone to destroy a document or to move a load. You just want to know what the DEA knows. If I know they're nosing around over here around, oh, that's my guy, and they're nosing around, let me stop dealing with him. Let me go over here. So, some of the federal investigators I've interviewed over the years for my documentaries work as PIs. A bunch of ones in a certain city that we did mob documentary stuff on, interviewed these FBI agents. When they retired, they became PIs employed at least some of the time by a guy alleged, not convicted, alleged, and thought to be by the FBI's own intelligence, one of or the key mafia power in a major U.S. city, has several FBI agents working for him as PIs. So that private investigator thing is the nexus between, or is a nexus along with lawyers. And the lawyers hire the PIs usually. PIs and lawyers, a nexus between the big criminals getting information about law enforcement. And usually law enforcement is very careful, and judges about who they let corrupt them, right? Who are they going to get the money from? You can't just walk up to the judge on a golf course and offer him money. You got to get a certain lawyer, and a certain lawyer, everybody doesn't get allowed to give a bribe, right? I mean, who are you? They got to trust you. Are you, there's many things that go into it, but the drug trade, global drug trade, is just a piggy bank, a convenient piggy bank for a lot of people. So those two agents were engaged in some relatively not that big of amounts of money, but a DEA agent only makes $75,000. For him to get $70,000 at once is a year's salary for passing on a little bit of information here and there. Sure, a lot of that goes on, and there was a scandal. The reason that Palmieri guy was getting looked into was one of the agents under his command, Jose Izarrari, who described himself as the most corrupt DEA agent ever. He recently got a 12-year sentence. He was skimming. He stole at least $9 million. Not so well. So now here's where the problem with the whole structure of using informants and just the whole way criminal justice is structured. The $9 million he was stealing were from cash transfers of money launderers. So you get a call from an informant. Hey, this group is given $20 million or $5 million, whatever, to be laundered to these bankers. And a DA intercedes and grabs the money. Whoever gave the tip may get up to a third of the money. So think about that. I could pose as a money launderer, or I could work as a money launderer, right? And then now when I want to get out of I could know you're sending me $20 million, but I'm having you deliver it to some certain address and some other person, and I turn that into an agent. I get legal protection for myself, and I get a third, up to a third, maybe 10%, 15%. That's negotiated separately each time. I get a bigger Like, I might only be charging them 5% to launder the money. I'm going to get 10 to 30% of it for turning it in. And this Izarari guy was stealing, so they would say, okay, it's going to be a $6 million drop. Well, we're going to tell the DEA it's $5.5 million. We're going to take a $500,000. Law enforcement steals a lot. You steal a little bit, and who's going to turn it in? Recently, I was doing some research on kidnapping stuff. Cavario's uncle, a guy I interview often if you don't know who he is, he was kidnapped back in the 90s. And I found the indictment of the guys who kidnapped him, and it referenced the kidnapping of Cavario's uncle. And the amount of money Cavario said they had to turn in was a little bit, it wasn't much more, it's like maybe an extra 100,000 or 50,000 more than what it said in the indictment. But I was like, oh, well, there's proof, some cop pocketed something. But back what I was talking about, this Izarari guy was an agent. He bought $1 million home in Cartagena, Colombia. He bought his wife $50,000 in jewelry. He was flying with Louis Vuitton luggage and big gaudy jewelry. Did nobody in the DEA notice? In his home in Cartagena, now mind you, this is a guy who makes base salary, say $80,000, even with overtime. What are you going to make, $150,000? And you're not going to make that much. And you're paying taxes. This isn't street money. Why does he have $1 million home in Cartagena, Colombia? And the people that were visiting his home, other DEA agents, supervisors, nobody asked any questions? Or was he letting them wet their beak? Or if they thought, oh, he's just taking a little something and he's the guy that pays for that. Listen, it's amazing when you're corrupting people who only make $80,000, $100,000 a year. You take them to a strip club and drop a couple thousand twice a year. You buy them and their wife some tickets to Disneyland once a year. Like, you don't have to give them vast sums of money. Regular people, even with a decent job, don't usually have, they can't spend $3,000 in a night. We're from watching TV shows and listening to these rap songs, we get immunized to, you think, oh, a couple grand ain't nothing. Well, how many people really have $2,000 to spend in a club? I mean, to hang out in nightclubs in big cities is a lot of damn money. Just to be in a club, much less you want to have women, you're buying women and hotel room. To fly into LA, get a couple hotel rooms, have a rental car, have some little security guy go around with you, pop some bottles at some club. I mean, you could run through 20 and have women. I mean, a couple guys can run through $20,000 smooth and easy in 2 days without even feeling like they did anything too wild. The liquor will kill you in the clubs. To get attention in an LA club, you have to buy what's called a coffin. That's when you get 10 bottles at once. So you're talking $7,000, $6,000, $8,000. I would buy my little $700 bottle of vodka with my little sparkler. Or no, you don't even get a sparkler. You buy a bottle of Tito's for $700 in a club in LA, you don't even get a sparkler. They'd bring it to you. You don't get a table. You don't even get any attention from the slores. You don't get no sparkler. Imagine paying an adult male DEA agent throwing his whole life and career away so he could have sparklers at the club. That's what it comes down to. Human beings are something else. So that Izarari down there in Cartagena, one of the visitors to his home was a black woman from Cleveland who was an attorney. So she's, just in the course of, I don't know what she was doing down there, she ends up getting nominated to be the first black female U.S. attorney in that Cleveland region, which is a big, northern Ohio is one of America's big population centers. She mysteriously had to withdraw from consideration when Izarari was arrested because he probably gave information on her, maybe not doing anything too horrible because they would have indicted her, but you're going to be a U.S. federal prosecutor. You can't, oh, yeah, I was at a corrupt DEA agent's party and I did a little ecstasy and I only did one line. Obviously that wouldn't look good. So corruption on our side of the border is a huge problem. And just the nature of all this illicit money floating around, the insatiable desire of Americans and others is, when you understand the pipeline from the source countries to the street corner, the proverbial final sale in the U.S., right? From farm to arm, they call it, or from the field to a dime bag. Basically, to manufacture and produce any of these substances, effectively is zero. Kilo of yay, all in, as far as raw production costs in the jungle, is $1,000 or less. So really all the money that's built into it is middlemen and corruption along the way. A lot for that. By the time a brick is, let's just say it's 40%, let's see, so that would give you 2.5 times 40,000. Oh yeah, that's 100,000. So by the time a brick is 40% and it's 40 a gram, that means you're making 100,000 off a gram by, let's just say, or a kilo by the time it's sold in the streets in America. That made $1,000 turn into 100,000. A lot of people got paid along the way, and you can understand why it really doesn't matter how much you seize. Oh, we lost 50? Well, just make 50 more. It's just a plant, just a bush. They pick leaves off a bush and dig a pit, put it in a pit and pour gas and some other stuff on it, stomp on it, mush it up, make a paste. Just make some more. It's the same thing with H, Betty, METH, all of it. You just make some more. Nobody cares about the losses. Just send more, send more, send more. It's harder moving the money back than it is moving the stuff there. It can't be stopped. So they're going to have to start looking at legalization. And speaking of corruption, the biggest corruption of all was finally somebody was sentenced from the other side of the border. They're even more corrupt than our agents. Genaro Garcia Luna, just a few months back, received a 38-year prison term. He's now at the infamous USP Lee in South Carolina Federal Penitentiary. Genaro Garcia Luna was formerly the head of the Federal Investigative Agency and the Secretary of Public Security under President Felipe Calderon. So all the way from 2001 to 2012, he was one of the couple highest ranking law enforcement in Mexico. He was the bag man for President Felipe Calderon, and at the trial of your boy, Shorty Guzman, these guys all just tell at each other. El Mayo's brother, a.k.a. El Rey the King, he testified that he personally was giving Garcia Luna, at the time the highest ranking law enforcement in Mexico, every time he came to him, he'd bring a couple duffel bags with $3 million in cash for him. And Garcia Luna either held his tongue against Felipe Calderon, or just the U.S. government doesn't want to hear it. There's no proof, and they don't care, and they're not going to take a former president of another country into custody. But Garcia Luna thought he was so protected that even though at the 2016 trials, multiple people said he received money to protect the operations, he was still flying in and out of the U.S. with no worries. In 2019, him and his wife flew into New York to go shopping in Manhattan, and he was taken into custody. That's how they grabbed him, and now he's cooling his heels with a 38-year sentence. And the fact that he didn't think he was at any risk at all from the U.S. government is proof of how corrupt the whole system was and is. Now, will Donald Trump saying he's going to get serious and lay down the law mean anything? Only time will tell. We shall see. I think it will mean something, but it may mean less than you think. But what is going on, it means something, is what Ovidio and Joaquin are doing, turning down a little bit and stabilizing more so the FWAP and working themselves some deals. So it'll be interesting what their global plea is. So that's the state of affairs, Mexican-U.S. relations and substances. Al Prophet, American Dope.